Hey everyone, Ben Coomber Radio, episode number 107. We've had a whole string of amazing guests recently, and we haven't really been that transatlantic, apart from Rachel. She's on every other week. We know who she is. Today, we've got another transatlantic show. I'm speaking to another man from the US. You may or may not have heard of this man. He does a lot of very performance-based discussions. He's been on previous podcasts like Superhuman Radio, Juggernaut, which are great shows in America, more kind of like training and performance-based. And this man is got some amazing content to share with you today. He's from, I hope I don't butcher this, Complete Human Performance. Alex Viada, hello.
Hi, how are you? Thanks for having me on the show.
I am awesome. Complete Human Performance. I suppose I don't really need to ask how that came about.
I mean, it probably came about because I'm terrible with names and tried to think of something that just encompassed the training methodology and the whole mentality. I actually founded this company. With my wife, and she was a pure runner, pure endurance athlete. I was a pure strength athlete, and over the years, the two of us were probably bad influences on each other, and started enjoying the idea of a lot of this crossover type of training and making it working together, and really the whole complete performance concept came from there.
Nice. So we need to find out who you are. Who on earth is Alex Viana? What does he do? What's his thing?
Right. So, I like most other people, I came from a marginally decent athletic background, nothing fantastic. Worked in pharmaceuticals for about 8 years. Over that time, got very into, my background was always powerlifting, strength sports, enjoyed them very much. But about 5 or 6 years ago, also got into distance racing. Was talked into doing a 5K, which I was horrible at. Then a few marathons, a few longer distance things, and realized I was hooked on that as well. So it took a number of years of trying to juggle the two and having performance be absolutely awful in both before we started really coming up with a methodology that allows people to excel in strength sports and make strength, size, muscle gains and the like, while still being able to participate in aerobic activity, endurance sports and the like. And it's been a tremendously enjoyable thing to do, especially for somebody with a complete exercise attention deficit disorder like I have.
I like it how you casually went, I was a power lifter, then I got talked into do a 5K, and then I just found myself doing marathons.
Well, there might have been a few pints involved after the 5K that got me talked into the marathon. I didn't really realize that till the next day, but...
So I think the big thing that got me interested in your work, and I got put in touch by your work by someone who works within one of my companies in my team called Tom Bainbridge, and he's a big fan of your work. And in the fitness industry, we look at disciplines, we look at sports, and we say, right, I'm a strength guy, I'm an endurance guy, I'm an X whatever it is guy, and you kind of train for that. And there's been conversations and arguments all over the internet for years to say that if you're a bodybuilder, you're a strength athlete, and you run, you're going to lose all your gains, your strength will disappear, you're not going to be able to optimize muscle mass, etc. So, and there's still a huge amount of argument and discussion about this, and the thought process has never really accelerated itself. So I think the key thing I want to extract from you today is, if we're looking at both performance, both strength, both endurance, how on earth does someone marry this up? And I suppose what are the biggest mistakes people make from trying to do this, and hence the conclusions have been made, it doesn't work, focus on one thing?
I mean, I can tell you exactly what some of the biggest mistakes are because I think I made all of them initially. One of the things I realized is that I used to follow a lot of fairly popular lifting routines. Mm-hmm. I've done the West Side Barbell, their conjugate routine. I've done 5-3-1. I've done a lot of other routines like that. And these programs are really designed and optimized for people who just do weight training. Even bodybuilding routines are designed for people who just do weight training. And a well-designed routine is going to leave very limited recovery on the table. In other words, it's going to push you pretty much to the limit, just enough to let you recover for the next session and progress. When I started training for my 5K, started training for marathons, I started using a couple of very, very popular marathon programs out there. I read Jack Daniel's Running and a few others. And I started following those. And those actually are the same idea. A good running program meant for a specialized runner is going to leave very little recovery on the table. You combine the two, and there's just not enough recovery in there for anybody. Mm-hmm. So the biggest mistake is following an existing routine out there and thinking that as a runner, as a strength athlete who wants to run, you can train like a runner and train like a strength athlete. You have to do less than either. You have to really tease out those portions of the resistance training, of the strength training, and of the endurance training that are critical for progress, but then know when to back off. So my running training would look extraordinarily lazy for a runner, as much as my resistance training would look extraordinarily lazy for a pure powerlifter, a pure bodybuilder, simply because you have to really, juggle that volume and make adjustments and really cut out all the junk, cut out the accessory work, cut out the junk miles, reduce the length of your recovery runs to help it all come together.
Okay. So give us a little insight, I suppose, into your training so people can start to contextualize what is high, low, or moderate volume for each of these disciplines. And so kind of Monday to Sunday, what does it look like for you?
Well, right now it's a little bit different. I'm actually training for a 100-miler. So
as you do.
What's that?
As you do. Just
100 miles. No, this this one in particular, training for something like that is much more about just getting down the running volume, just getting the miles in, getting the hours in. Remember, I'm going to be switching when I start training for the Ironman. That's going to be a little more interesting because I have a powerlifting meet a week before that. So typically, what the structure looks like is this. I tend to front load the week with higher intensity, lower volume training. So my Monday, Tuesday will be, for example, my heavier sets of squats, heavier sets of bench press. They're talking about relatively short workout days where you're dealing with heavier loads but doing fewer repetitions. And typically I'll follow with one basic movement, one initial compound movement, and maybe one or two accessories to work on weak points. And that's it for the lifting. Very, very limited, very basic, very simple. On the same day as I do that, I'll also do my more speed-based work for the running. For example, on Monday, I will typically go out and run half-mile intervals, quarter-mile intervals, do any track work, things like that. But again, relatively low volume. I don't do hour-and-a-half-long track workouts. It'll be anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, mostly focused just on a few mid-distance intervals. Mm-hmm. Now, as the week goes on, I may take an off day on Wednesday or go for a swim or something more minimally taxing. As I move into the weekend, the intensity decreases, so I will no longer do my heavy lifts then. I'll do relatively lightweight. I'll do either repetition work, more for muscle growth, or do dynamic effort, speed work, plyometric explosive work. I'll have some athletes do Olympic lifting on those days just to keep their speed and explosiveness up, especially because that's one thing that suffers as you do more endurance training is obviously that speed. Your body is building efficiency so often that it loses some of that explosive power. So the end of the week will have that speed, explosive, but overall lower intensity lifting volume. And then the running and the cardiovascular training will become slower but greater in distance. So on a Saturday, I may do a 3-hour run or a 6-hour bike or something along those lines. So that's it's that weekly undulation from high intensity, low volume to high volume, low intensity that really makes this whole thing work.
Wow. So in all of that, do you have one out-and-out rest day where you're literally on the sofa in front of the NFL with a six-pack?
That's usually the idea. Lately, it's been tough just because I've had a busy schedule. So there have been some days when I've had to just, I'll have to split up the days, and I may, for example, today I have a bike and a run when in reality I was just supposed to have a bike just because I missed it. So every now and then, a couple weeks go by where I won't have a scheduled rest day, but I've noticed I can only tolerate that for 2 to 3 weeks at a time before I really start to suffer. Sure. So I always recommend at least one day completely off for people.
I suppose an interesting thing, what you did in your journey as you became more of an accomplished powerlifter, strength-based athlete, and then moved into the endurance. So I would assume that before you got into endurance, you were quite a big guy. You had the strength, you had the muscle mass to a degree.
Yep.
Is there an easier transition to make? Because all you had to do in that instance was maintain muscle mass and add a discipline to your training. Now, if I've got a guy who's more endurance-based and I start to say, well, you really want to compete in the strength realm, would that be a harder transition to make to add the strength and powerlifting discipline to his endurance?
That's a very good question, actually, because I mentioned my wife. She comes from an ultramarathon Ironman background entirely. She's relatively lean, very slender, and she started moving into strength sports. So she moved in exactly the opposite direction. And there's certainly challenges to that. It's very difficult to get endurance athletes to consider a simple weights workout to be sufficiently taxing. It's difficult to get that mentality down where they eat more than they have actually burned on a given day. I know a lot of endurance athletes, a lot of great runners, a lot of great cyclists. They typically think about their caloric intake to be, kind of equal to their expenditure. And it's a difficult switch in mindset to say, okay, today you're just going to go lift heavy weights for an hour and a half, and then you're going to go home and you're going to eat something and you're going to relax. So psychologically, that's a tough adjustment for a lot of them to make. But the one thing I've found that endurance athletes are exceptionally good at that gives them an advantage is they tend to have almost a masochistic sort of pain tolerance that I think a lot of weight training athletes don't have. I've found the endurance athletes I've worked with, they can do tremendous amounts of volume. You tell them to push something to failure or push something for another few repetitions, they'll do it every time. So it's physically it's perhaps challenging just because their love is running and they'll always be out running more than you tell them to. I think in a lot of ways they're actually very well suited for strength training and for muscle gain simply because they have that work ethic and that like I said, that pain tolerance.
I think that's a huge asset to have, and I think I discovered that in myself this summer. I play sport. People will laugh when I say this comment 'cause I've said it a lot on the podcast, but I play rugby. So during the off season, we get 3 months to get in the gym, hustle, work on your weak points, that kind of thing. And previous summers, I hadn't worked hard enough on trying to put on some muscle. And I would say that my knowledge has increased as an individual even more to be able to do that. So I worked really, really hard during the summer, and I got someone else to do all my programming for the first time, which I think is a godsend. And I got put through some grueling programs, and I had to push my pain tolerance further and further and further, especially on like these the leg days, like especially when you really want to drive the volume through the quads and stuff. And I really noticed how quickly my body adapted and grew. Because the sessions, they really did have to be really hard to stimulate. And I am kind of an advanced trainer. I've been lifting for 8 or 9 years. So I need a big stimulus. So, I had to work harder than I've ever had to work before.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially because sometimes it doesn't always seem to translate either. It's every sport is different. Rugby certainly has. I played as well. Certainly has its own level of serious discomfort in certain aspects of it. I mean, the first time you get a cleat to the side of your face and get half your ears scraped off and keep playing, you think, I can handle anything. But then you go in and either you're doing either sprint intervals or you're doing breathing squats where you're doing 25 repetitions with no let up in between, and everything is burning, and you have to mentally adjust to be able to push through this different stress, something you weren't really aware that your body was capable of.
Well, I think when you get into a game environment in sport, it's very easy to get caught up in the moment and not feel pain, and for adrenaline to be firing. It's like, you've just mentioned endurance athletes. Like, once you get into a run and you get going, you start to really be able to push yourself. In rugby, once you get into the huddle and everyone's talking and everyone's shouting and you make your first hit and you do this, it's got to be a bad hit for you to feel pain because all the right juices are flowing.
Right. You can have your elbow bent backwards and hanging by your side and you'll still be wanting to, stay in the game. Exactly.
Exactly, but in the gym, when you turn up and Mr. Viana said, right, you need to go and do X amount of sprints, these kettlebell swings, and X spin bike things, and you got to do that on your own. That is really hard because there's a huge mental barrier to doing that
Yes.
stuff on your own in an isolated environment.
It is, and what's actually interesting talking about endurance athletes doing strength sports and the like, and vice versa, is there's not much of a support network. We tend to socialize and interact with individuals with similar tastes. And there are some some powerlifters, some bodybuilders I work with, and I'll have them out there doing track work and things like that. And they want to complain to their friends about them about doing this work, who just look at them and say, well, you're crazy. Why are you doing that at all? just stop. Go home. Eat something.
So that's an interesting point. If you're working with bodybuilders and strength athletes, what is actually your rationale for them to go onto the track and do other kind of work when I'm assuming their key derivative is bodybuilding?
Well, actually, for a number of them, and this is actually fun, I work with a lot of guys in the military. Okay. Especially because there are a lot of them who want to do strength training, who want to be strong, who want to be fit, who want to be able to enter a powerlifting meet if they want, or do a bodybuilding competition. But obviously the military has requirements for the PT tests and the like, where they have to be able to maintain a certain pace over a mile or 2 miles, have to do a certain number of push-ups and sit-ups. So for them, they have to combine the training out of necessity. So I would say there's a good portion of people I work with who they may not love running, but they still want to be able to hit a certain time in their 1.5 mile run. So that's a big portion of it. There are some powerlifters out there. I work with one guy who's a professional strongman who says, I just want to be able to play with my kids. Yeah. I don't like going down to the park and realizing that after playing with them for 2 minutes, I have to sit down on a bench for the next 20 minutes to catch my breath. So, for them, it's almost a lifestyle type of shift. A lot of them just like to feel a little more fit, a little more in shape. So, for them, obviously, this is a lot more low intensity. There's no reason to have them go out and run for 5 hours or, go down to the track and do 100-meter repeats. But there's certainly some conditioning that's optimal for them. For a lot of the guys, as far as kind of sports specific goes, though, if somebody says, I just want to do powerlifting, I will have them do kind of a minimal level of conditioning. I'll still incorporate 1 or 2 runs or rows or bikes into the routine, not necessarily because it'll directly benefit their performance, but it can certainly benefit their lifestyle and it'll certainly benefit their training. Because I think just having an increased aerobic capacity, it does make it easier to recover between sets. It makes you able to tolerate slightly longer workouts. There are just a bunch of intangible benefits that I think really help with the training.
I'm really pleased you brought up this point, because when I was kind of especially going through my kind of personal training years and working in the coaching environment a lot more, and essentially the gym work, I kind of bought into the fact that, well, I need to build muscles, so I'm just going to focus on this muscle thing and getting in the gym 4 or 5 days a week. And before that, I'd always been an athlete and played sports to a degree, whether it was rugby, hockey, swimming, and I enjoyed those sports. Like, there is a great sense of satisfaction, but putting on your trainers, just going out in the outdoors, even if it's for 20, 30 minutes, and just getting the fresh air and allowing your legs to kind of open up. And when I wasn't playing rugby and I was just focusing on the gym work, I didn't do that because I thought it was just the right thing to do with only getting in the gym. And again, what you're now starting to say with this balance kind of thing is, we're trying to build muscle, but we're also trying to keep general base conditioning levels up, keep the heart healthy, keep well-being high. And I think, even if you're a gym guy, we should be getting out for a run or a cycle or a swim or a long walk or whatever.
Yeah, and I think it's looking at a lot of professional athletes is really, that's where a lot of this the thought that it can be done comes from. I mean, you look at some of these rugby players. I mean, look at the size of their legs. Tell me these are not tremendously strong individuals, but you look at their sprint speed and their endurance to play a whole game. It's fantastically good. Rugby, you can't just sit there. Even if you're a prop, you can't just sit there the entire time and have no aerobic capacity whatsoever. You look at American football players, and some of these individuals, they have 300 kilo squats, but they can still run miles in, less than 6 minutes. So these are just fit all around individuals who have strength numbers that beat out a lot of gym rats and endurance numbers that beat out a lot of casual runners. So you say, well, obviously some of them are genetically gifted, but at the same time, it can be done. They don't have to work at cross purposes. And these individuals, when you're feeling in good shape, when you're feeling in good competitive shape, and you're really at the top of your game, you just feel fantastic.
Nice, awesome. Right, we need to tie the diet component into this, because training in this nature is obviously going to take a decent approach to nutrition. What are your opinions on nutrition? How do you kind of dice it up in between the strength aspect, the endurance aspect, and overall, I suppose, caloric need?
Well, so, I mentioned a bit of that weekly cycle of high intensity to high volume. Mm-hmm. That's actually how I structure my diet as well. The beginning portion of the week is actually roughly isocaloric. I try to match calories just to kind of a baseline daily intake. Mm-hmm. If the endurance training on those days only lasts 30 minutes, that's actually a very, very nominal extra amount of calories right there. Then, of course, as the weekend goes on, there's some days when I've had 6-7 hour rides where I'll probably take in around 8,000 calories. So obviously the challenge here is if you do this much activity, you can't eat clean, as it were. There's no way through chicken and rice you can have quite enough intake. I don't follow the paleo diet. I don't follow any of those kind of diets. It tends to be fairly well-rounded, fairly high carbohydrate, moderate fats. I don't endorse massive amounts of protein. I think the guideline I still tend to follow is about 1.5 grams per kilo, which is still considered fairly high in medical circles. But you look at one example I always bring up is burn patients. These are individuals who have massive, massive protein needs, so much damage done to their body that there's no way they can physically build up enough tissue. And they're at about 3 grams of protein per kilo of body weight.
Wow.
So, you have these people who are taking in 4 or 5 grams per kilo, and you say, what is your body doing with all that? So being able to keep it relatively simple, focus on carbohydrates, complex carbohydrates over the course of the day, really makes it a lot easier. And, I said, as far as calories go, there's no set formula I use, but I found that I would rather, on the high volume days, overeat and then undereat on the high intensity days, because it doesn't really impact my performance there.
Sure.
And overall, just kind of, say I figure at this point my basal caloric intake is 3,700 per day just to maintain. Mm-hmm. So on the high intensity days, I may only take in 3,400, 3,500. On the high volume days, I may go up to 4,500 to 5,000, trying to keep that overall balance over the week. As far as the importance of it, though, this is something I have everybody do when they first start with me, is to track every morsel of food that goes into their mouth for about a week and a half. And what this lets you do is really get a sense of, okay, what exactly am I eating? What is this doing to my recovery? And, then just make small adjustments up or down.
Okay. Based on probably what body composition changes?
Exactly. Body composition changes, energy levels, especially recovery. Have you heard of HRV, heart rate variability?
I have, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that a number of my clients have been using. That's actually been very interesting, just as far as daily recovery goes. And I've noticed if calories tend to be a bit too low, all of their readings actually go. It goes from green, yellow to red. The readings drop dramatically, just as a general indicator of hormonal levels and recovery levels and everything else.
See, that's fascinating, because I've talked a huge amount on the podcast about undereating, potential dysregulation of many bodily processes, and the problems that especially females encounter from doing years and years of low-calorie diets. And what you're now saying is a direct, acute or short-term correlation between undereating and actually your performance literally going down the next day, which is essentially what you're saying.
Absolutely, and because I think especially with this sort of training, there's no room for error. I think if you're doing nothing but weight training and you're not eating enough, typically the only result that happens is you tend to stagnate. You tend to plateau first, then you slowly may start to see your lifts decrease, your body composition change. Endurance athletes have another interesting tendency, and that is as they lose weight, their performance may temporarily increase simply because they're lighter. So their fitness may be decreasing, but since their body weight is decreasing, they may not necessarily notice this.
Mm.
I've worked with a number of runners, especially ultra runners and people who do high volume, and when they don't eat enough temporarily, they feel fantastic. And they think, they tell me, oh, well, I've only been taking in 1,300 calories a day and I'm feeling great. My runs are fast. But in reality, all those processes you're talking about, those hormone levels, all of those things, those are plummeting and going all in the wrong direction. And they may not realize this for 3 or 4 weeks or 5 weeks or 6 weeks or well into the season when they hit that true overtrain mark and just can't recover. But of course, if you're doing both, you start to notice almost immediately. If you're losing weight because of your diet, your strength training will suffer nearly immediately. And then your endurance will absolutely go to heck because after doing a heavy set of squats, you need food to recover. And you may notice 2 days later when you go for your run or go for a bike that your legs just have nothing left in them whatsoever. So the higher stressors and the varied stressors behind this kind of training really almost instantly highlight any sort of nutritional deficits that you may have.
Wow, nice. I know a lot of sports teams in the UK that use HRV technology, and there will literally be a day where an athlete will come in. They're showing orange, red. They're not recovered properly. They might have a game that day, and the club will say you're not playing today. And what people don't know is we see this in the very high exposed sports in the UK, even like Premiership football, where you'll kind of sit there and go, whoa, why isn't Thingy playing today? And there's not really a media related reason, but it's probably because they're showing some HRV signs. And remember, like you've discussed, it could be under eating, not recovering properly, but it could be something emotional as well. That's an emotional stressor it's affecting them and their central nervous system. If you're working with a client with HRV and they're showing these signs, the scenario that I just talked about, a club will say, right, you're not training, you're not playing. Do you take that standpoint? Do you kind of say, well, you've got X scheduled today in your training program, let's not do it?
I think typically, if in training, it's a little bit easier. If they say, they'll shoot me a note in the morning that says, my HRV is red today, or it's amber. I'll usually what I'll do is I'll downregulate their training a little bit. I'll say, look, you skip those 2 heavy sets. Skip anything that's going to be mentally taxing. If you're doing intervals, just reduce your speed by 10 to 15%. Still go out there and move, but don't do anything that takes a tremendous amount of psychological energy or physical energy stores or anything else. I think the reason is I still see the benefit to doing recovery runs, to doing light lifting workouts and things like that. Even, the day after, I had a powerlifting meet on Saturday. I went out for a long run the next day and actually ended up feeling better. So even when your system is under recovered, there's still some value, I think, to doing some level of activity. I think it's a lot more difficult in a game, though, of course, because, these are professionals. They're not going to just go through the motions and play at 75% because their HRV is amber. You can't tell somebody, just don't sprint down the field. I just want you in on 30% of the plays today. Just take it easy out there. No one's going to do that.
Sure.
So they're knowing that if they field them, if they play them, they're going to be going 100%, and that's just going to make things worse. So, if somebody has an event coming up, or I actually had a case where an individual did have a CrossFit event coming up on the weekend, and their HRV was reading red Monday and Tuesday. And this was not a major event for them. This wasn't something hugely critically important. I told them, just let's take this one off the schedule, focus on the next one. And actually what was interesting is shortly after I said that and they struck the event, everything went back to normal. I think in some ways it was probably the stress of doing something they didn't feel well prepared for that was just sending them into this, downward spiral. So it's, as you mentioned, the psychology, it's been interesting to work with.
Nice. I hear that in your deep dark past somewhere that, or when you were younger, that you suffered with an eating disorder.
I did.
Now, I think this is a really interesting topic because I think many people have their own personal challenges and everyone's situation is very unique, and not enough people kind of talk about it because Well, it's just very difficult subject to talk about in the public domain. Um, what were, I suppose, initially, what was the kind of issue for you, and what was the path of recovery to lead you to where you are now, I suppose?
Well, it's interesting because I still think a lot of people who have never experienced them have misconceptions about eating disorders. For me, I was very active in high school. I played about 6 different sports. I played tennis. I swam. I played football. I was very active. And when I went to college, of course, I couldn't play this. I went to Duke, which is a Division I top tier athletics school. I wasn't good enough to play any of these sports at the college level, so I stopped them all and gained a tremendous amount of weight. All the bad kind, about 80 pounds over about a year and a half. Looked and felt terrible and everything else. And finally decided that I was going to do something about this and start dieting. And I think one thing I found in common with a lot of people with eating disorders is that they have a very, almost an all or nothing type of mentality. A lot are very, very competitive in a lot of ways, or they're very ruthless with themselves. And that's a lot of what happened to me was when I started dieting and I realized, okay, not eating takes willpower. It takes self-control. I can see results from it. This is something that I'm going to excel at. I'm going to become as lean and small as possible. And it worked. And it's one of these, vicious circles where you continue to see that scale weight drop and mentally you think about it as an achievement. You think, here I was 165 in high school. I'm 230 pounds. I was 105 kilos then in college. And I dieted down to, 55, 56 kilos. What's the conversion there?
2.2 pounds to the kilo.
Yeah. So thereabouts and even lower. And here I thought this is an achievement. I'm feeling great. I set my mind to do something, and I'm able to do it. And it became so wrapped up in my identity, I just didn't eat. Mm. And it's almost difficult to go back and explain where you're at the time, but it wasn't. I wasn't trying to live up to anybody else's ideal but my own. I thought this is me. This is my thing, and I would look around at people who were 10 pounds heavier than I was and say in a lot of ways, I'm better than them. Mm. I have this self-control that they don't have. And it's difficult to go back and think about. But, I realized, and I mentioned this to some people, I remember there was one night when I lost all voluntary motor control, all voluntary muscle control. Went through, had mild seizures and spasms for most of the night. Tremendous electrolyte imbalance, tremendous nutrient imbalance. And that was sort of the wake-up call that this wasn't going to be sustainable. And, it was a tough road to climb out of. There are not a lot of resources out there, especially for men who have this issue, and I know a number who do. And it took a lot of, there were some dark times. It was difficult to get back to the idea of, okay, I need to actually eat to fuel myself, and I'm okay with gaining a bit of weight. And I was taking diet drugs at the time that kept me very lean, and suddenly seeing my face fill out again was challenging. I think the biggest takeaway is that I think anybody coming out from something like that needs to remember it's not going to be a smooth path at all. There were days I went back where I didn't eat anything at all. There were days when I'd go down to a vending machine and clean it out just because I was so happy to eat junk food again. Mm-hmm. But eventually what I realized I needed to do was that feeling of accomplishment, control, and everything else, I needed to redirect it towards something constructive. Mm-hmm. So rather than having just be as thin as possible be the goal, I said, I want to be as strong as possible. I want to be as physically capable as possible. It was recentering that focus and that drive and that almost addiction to something constructive and learning to reframe it that really got me out of it.
Wow. I think focusing on words like I'm strong, I want to be powerful. I think these are really empowering words because in the fitness world, a lot of the time we base our goals around body composition or weight. Yep. I want to be skinny or I want to be lean, and that's kind of it. And that's why I think I'm a huge fan of, especially the movement in the fitness industry of girls gone strong or strong women. There's a lot of companies promoting this, and I think it's great that, don't get me wrong, these women, these groups of coaches are still saying, let's get lean, let's get the body that we want, but let's focus on strength, and it's both physical and mental strength, because it is an immensely powerful thing to feel physically strong and capable with your own body, whether you do a sport or not. Knowing that you have something bigger inside you than people think, I think is quite liberating.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's that's again one of the things, we talked a bit about nutrition for this kind of training. I have a lot of people who do it. I tell them to eat a lot, and I tell them, don't worry, you're not, even if you gain a few pounds, you're eating for performance. You're trying to do such amazing things with your body right now that you can't starve it. Mm-hmm. It's fuel the training you do. If you eat too much, it'll just let you train harder. Mm-hmm. It's let your body grow, let your body adapt, let it do all these incredible things that you're trying to get it to do, and don't shortchange it. Don't shortchange yourself by trying to hang on to those bottom two abs, which they can come back easily. Anybody can do that. Mm-hmm. I think anybody can sit back and starve themselves and get themselves a six-pack, but how many people can actually really demonstrate what their bodies are capable of doing on the performance side?
Awesome. Okay, let's wrap up and kind of box our suggestions and our conversation that we've just had. If someone is right now either a power lifter or an endurance-based runner, and they're sitting here thinking, do you know what, I'm going to try and incorporate some of the other side into their training. If you could just give people 1, 2, 3 tips to say, look, before you do it, just think about this. Like, these are the important things to think about. What would you say?
First thing I would tell them to do is cut the junk. And that is, don't work out for the sake of working out. I know there are a lot of runners out there who feel terrible if they skip a run on a given day. Mm-hmm. They feel like they have to go out and run a little bit every day. And of course, if you want to make any sort of weight training progress, you do have to have the occasional rest day in there. So the first thing I tell people is always, anytime you go out for a run, or anytime you go into the gym or anything else, or have any component planned, think about what you want to get out of it. Mm-hmm. If you can't answer the question, how am I going to improve through this workout, then you shouldn't do it. And when I tell that to a lot of runners, it usually leads to them chopping out about 25% of their less useful workouts, those 2 or 3 mile runs that don't do anything for them. The other thing I would tell them to do is immerse themselves in the other sport, however distasteful it may be. Go look at message boards, go pick up books, reframe. And for a lot of people, there's a certain amount of, I don't want to say disrespect, but there are a lot of strength athletes who look at runners and think, I can't learn anything from that person. They're half my size. And the other way around, runners who look at 300-pound powerlifters and say, well, I don't want to look like that. Realize that good advice is good advice regardless of source, and really embrace the mentality of good coaches in that other discipline, and maybe don't necessarily follow their routines, but listen to how they put ideas together. Nice. Don't write anyone off just because they look dramatically different than you want to look like. People sometimes don't want to take advice from bodybuilders. People who just want to lose a few pounds don't want to take advice from bodybuilders because they say, they look ridiculous. But who knows more about getting lean than a bodybuilder? So I'd say those are the 2 main things. Cut out the junk and embrace the other side. Immerse yourself in it.
Oh, lovely. Really good advice, Alex. I sense you're a man that likes to achieve big things. What are some of the big things that you're trying to achieve in the future? What goals are you working on right now?
Well, athletically, I wish I was 5 years younger, but athletically over the next about 6 months or so, I'm just trying to get my last round of somewhat crazy events done. I have a 100-mile ultra marathon in 3 weeks. I'm doing my first Ironman with an actual time goal. About 4 weeks after that, I'm looking to get a qualifying total for a national powerlifting championship this fall as well. And in the spring, I would like to actually switch over to masters track and field, mm-hmm. and record some good fast mile times. Just because I think that's always been kind of my best personal distance. And though I may not necessarily set any state records, I think I could probably win a few probably win a yearly championship or two. So athletically, that's what I want to do. On the other side of things, I think this coaching business that I've been doing, the reward from it's been tremendous. And I think my goal here is just if I can make more individuals happier, healthier, and kind of broaden their horizons and kind of leave a lasting impact on this industry, that doing both, being healthy, being well-rounded is part of all this, even at the elite levels, I think I'll feel like I've actually made a difference.
Amazing. I just wanted to pick up on a final point. Actually, it's interesting that you mentioned so many disciplines, because what you're doing as a guy that's older in his sport or in his kind of training years is that you're always keeping things fresh, and you're always really essentially setting PRs for yourself. Like, you're not critically assessing yourself against other people. And one of my companies, Transdermal Technology, one of our kind of like main ethoses and themes now is set your own PR, because people are so concerned in the fitness world of comparing themselves to their friends and other people, and it stops them from doing things. Like, people will sit there and go, oh, I want to do this, I want to go and try CrossFit or triathlon or whatever, and they go, oh, I don't know what my friends will think and I won't be the best. I'm like, if you go with the mentality that you'll never be the best, you'll never be anything, because no one will ever really be the best. There'll always be someone doing something somewhere that's better. And I just think it's amazing that you just sit there and you think, do you know what, I'm going to go and do some Masters track and field because I think it'll be fun, and I'll set some personal PRs, and hey, I'll have some fun with it. Just keep training fresh.
And that's the thing, and that's another thing that's hard to get used to. If you're a 300-pound powerlifter, you're going to be a very bad runner. And you just have to be okay with that. And you have to be okay with the fact that you're going to go out there and you're going to feel like you're slower than everyone else. And, you may enter a 5K and you may be fifth from last, but that's okay. This is something you never thought you'd do at all. So embrace it. It's, yes, we all like to win, and we all like to compete against others, and we all have that competitive drive that makes us want to beat someone else. But, at the end of the day, there are so many things you'll limit yourself from ever attempting if that's your only goal.
Amazing. I really enjoyed this chat, Alex. I think it's been really fantastic, and I think you've brought a bit of a fresh perspective to training, which I think will make people think. And I think, if we can help some people find the running shoes again, find the squat shoes again, get the bike out of the garage, and actually complementing training rather than making it too linear, I think that is perfect.
Absolutely. Ben, thanks so much.
Alex, people need to find your work because I think it's fascinating. Where are your links? Facebook, Twitter, websites? Where are they?
Well, CompleteHumanPerformance.com is the website. There's a lot of articles up there that outline the basic training philosophy. JTSStrength.com has another few articles of mine. That's Juggernaut Training Systems. I think At Large Nutrition as well has a few of my articles linked. And you can always find me on Facebook at Alex Viada. I try to be as accessible as possible there to people. And that's really it. I'm going to be giving a couple seminars. Actually, I'll be over in Ireland in 2 weeks.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You should have told me, because we could have put this podcast up before your trip to Ireland and pimped it.
No, we're going to be over at I'm doing a seminar at CrossFit Bray.
Okay.
So we're going to be talking about off-season CrossFit programming. And CrossFitters obviously love this whole philosophy, so it'll be a good time.
Awesome. Well, perhaps you should come over to the UK.
I can't see a good reason not to.
Because if you want people to see you from the UK, they will not go to Ireland. And if you want people from Ireland to see you, they'll not go over to the UK. That 50-minute flight is just too far.
I well understand that.
Amazing. Well, look, everyone, you've heard Alex's links. Alex Viana across the social networks, and Complete Human Performance is his website. Please go check it out. I think he's got a great, very fresh perspective on training, nutrition, and getting a very complete perspective on it. If you've enjoyed the show, please do me the massive honour of leaving a review on iTunes or Stitcher, leaving a comment on the YouTube video, retweeting it, liking it on Facebook. Look, the show doesn't grow without you guys, so I'd really appreciate that. And I will see you with Rachel next week for more of your Q&A. It's goodbye from me and Alex.
And thank you very much. Thank you for having me on the show.
Right, see you next time, kids. Ciao. Hey everyone, Vancouver Radio, episode number 106. I am back with the foxy lady herself, Miss Rachel Guy. Miss Rachel Guy, hello.